Given an array, find the next greater element and the previous greater element of element I. Let's see what this means by the next greater element. For example, for 5, the next greater element would be 9. For 3, the next greater element would be 9. For 2, the next greater element would also be 9. And for 9, there's no next greater element, and for 4, there's also no next greater element. But how do we achieve finding these in a single run through the array? To do this, we have to use the monotonic stack. Let's try an example to find the next greater element for each number in the array. We will initialize our result array to -1, where -1 means do not find the next greater element. We initialize our stack with the first element of the array. The idea is to find if we have found the next greater element for the top of the stack. In this case, 5 is the top of the stack. We can say that 5 is trying to find its next greater element. We move on to the next element, and we want to check if 3 is the next greater element for 5. But 5 is greater than or equal to 3, so 5 did not find its next greater element. But we also know that 3 is trying to find its next greater element, so we push 3 onto the stack. For 2, we want to see if the top of the stack, 3, has found its next greater element. But since 3 is greater than or equal to 2, that means 3 did not find its next greater element. But 2 is trying to find its next greater element. So we push 2 onto the stack. Then we move on to 9. The top of the stack, 2, is less than 9, so that means the top of the stack, 2, has found its next greater element. And we want to record that in our result array, and we pop 2. The top of the stack is now 3. 3 is less than 9, that means 3 has found its next greater element. So we record that in our result array, and we pop 3. Now the top of the stack is 5. 5 is less than 9. 5 has found its next greater element. We record this in our result array, and then we pop the stack. So now 9 is trying to find its next greater element. So we push 9 onto the stack. Now the pointer is pointing at 4. So we want to see if that's the next greater element for the top of the stack. But 9 is greater than or equal to 4, so 9 did not find its next greater element. And 4 is also trying to find its next greater element, so we push 4 onto the stack. But now we're running out of elements in the array, so we're done. We can try to do this in code. We want to initialize the array that we want to find the next greater elements for. We initialize the stack and the result array. In this code, we push the index instead of the value. So at first we push 0, which is index 0, onto the stack. Then we initialize the index to 1. And we want to read until the end of the nums array. So in this while loop, as long as we can find the next greater element for the top of the stack, we record the next greater element for the top of the stack, and then pop the stack. Now we will be left with the index that we want to find the next greater element for, so we push it onto the stack. We then increment the index. But what about finding the previous greater element? So the previous greater element of 4 is 9. The previous greater element of 9 does not exist. The previous greater element of 2 is 3. The previous greater element of 3 is 5. We can use the same logic that we found the next greater element for to find the previous greater element. To do this, we just read the array backwards. So in this case, to find the previous greater element, we initialize our stack with 4. Now you're equipped with ideas that will help you solve Leetcode 496.